Cabrini-Green projects, easily one of the most notorious projects in the history of Chicago. Some people may say that the Cabrini-Green projects is the most notorious projects that the city has ever seen.
Put them in a little world of their own.
This Cabrini-Green living, man. This is how we do it.
And the old Cabrini-Green housing project.
The city of Chicago began the construction of the Cabrini-Green projects after World War II in 1942, and by 1945, the Francis Cabrini row houses were complete. The Cabrini-Green projects were named after Francis Cabrini, who was the first American that was canonized by the Catholic Church. Also, Cabrini-Green was built on top of an old Italian slum called Little Hell. This slum was knocked down because of the crime and the violence.
In the 1920s, this was a dumping ground for bodies. It was an Italian ghetto at the time.
Cabrini was built initially to provide housing for the factory workers and the war workers. But after the war was over, the factories moved. This left a lot of poor Italian and Irish families. Those families would eventually migrate elsewhere. When the Francis Cabrini row houses were finished, there were 54 buildings and 586 units. In 1957, they would actually finish the Cabrini-Green extension homes, adding 1,925 units in 15 buildings. In 1962, Cabrini-Green would be complete, when the Green homes would actually be completed and fit to live in. This would be 23 more towers and 3,000 more units. The Green homes will actually be named after a guy that went by the name of William Green. He was a labor leader. This is how you get the name Cabrini after Francis Cabrini and Green after William Green. Eventually, throughout the years, this will become a black neighborhood and gangs will rise up. They would take over Cabrini-Green in totality because of poor funding and improper police protection. As a matter of fact, most of Chicago police were scared to even go in or near the Cabrini-Green projects because of the fact that guys would be on the roof picking people off. Snipers have been prevalent in Cabrini-Green ever since the assassination of Martin Luther King. On April 6, 1968, snipers set up on the roof at 1200 North Larrabee and shot at firemen and police. Police would later discover the body of Curtis Jeffro shot in the head. Ever since this happened, the police have been scared to go into Cabrini-Green. The next sniper incident would happen 2 years later, on Friday, July 17th, 1970, where 2 police officers will be gunned down from 2 different high-rise buildings. Even though there was a lot going on in Cabrini-Green in the early 70s and late 60s, Cabrini-Green was made famous from the popular show Good Times. They began broadcasting in the projects February 8th, 1974. In the spring of 1981, the Cabrini-Green projects will receive even more publicity as Mayor Jane Byrne would go live there for 20 days. It is widely believed that Mayor Jane Byrne only went to the Cabrini-Green projects for political gain. Be that as it may, the tenants of the Cabrini-Green projects will obviously feel safer because in those 20 days that she stayed at the projects, there was only one murder. October 1992 will mark the beginning of the ending of the Cabrini-Green projects when a little 7-year-old boy by the name of Dantrell Davis was walking to school and got hit by sniper fire. Dantrell Davis was an American 7-year-old boy from Chicago, Illinois, who was murdered in October 1992. Davis was walking to school with his mother in the Cabrini-Green housing projects when he was accidentally shot by Anthony Garrett, the member of a local street gang intending to shoot a rival. His death sparked an increased awareness to the extensive violence occurring in Chicago's inner city projects and led to the first street gang truce in Cabrini-Green, which lasted for 3 years. Garrett was convicted of first-degree murder for Davis's death and received a 100-year sentence. So as you can see, the killing of children has never been justified or condoned in the city of Chicago. And as a matter of fact, it was the last straw to the Cabrini-Green projects.
He was 7 years old when he was murdered in 1992 while walking to school from Cabrini-Green. His death sparked a gang truce, the murder of a child even too much for the streets back then. Decades later, children are being murdered playing outside, in the house, in the car. Always investigating, Charlie DeMar has more on what happened to the code, where children were off limits.
My son got killed in my face. You know, standing on the side of me.
Annette Freeman was walking her son Dantrell Davis to school in 1992 from their Cabrini-Green Projects home when Anthony Garrett, perched up in a high-rise, shot and killed the 7-year-old.
I think of Danny every day.
Dantrell's killer later confessing that he was aiming for a rival gang member.
When Danny died, I'm telling you, these black kings, these black men, they stood up because they looked at Danny, this is my son, this could be my nephew, my grandchild.
Danny's death sparking outrage. It led to the demolition of the Cabrini-Green projects and even ignited a truce between the gangs.
That truce lasted for at least 3 to 4 years.
Coincidentally, 3 days after the death of Dantrell Davis, the movie Candyman was released. This movie was based on a true story from another Chicago Housing Authority apartment. The story of Ruthie McCoy would take place in the ABLA homes, where intruders would come through her mirror and murder her. If you would like more on this story, scroll down through my playlist and you will see the origins of the Candyman. In 1997, more bad news will come from the Cabrini-Green projects, in which the demolition had begun, but it was a long ways from being finished. Patrick Sykes would kidnap Shatoya Curry, rape her, and leave her for dead. The night before the attack, Girl X had slept over at her best friend's apartment on the 2nd floor of the Cabrini-Green high-rise where they lived. 10-year-old Shavante Fluker remembers that the girls, as usual, stayed up much later than they should have on a school night. They had spent the evening watching cartoons and playing Girl X's favorite game, school. That night she was the student and I was the teacher, Shavante said. The next morning on January 9th, the girls got up at 7 a.m., washed and dressed for school. Shavante was still in her room when her best friend headed out the door an hour and a half later. She said she was going upstairs to get her book bag and take her t-shirt to her grandmother's house. Shavante never saw her 9-year-old friend again. Shatanya Edwards, also 9, was heading down the stairs at 8:30 on her way to school when she saw Girl X bent over in the 6th floor landing, tying her gym shoes. We said hi and I kept going, said Shatanya. Apparently just moments later, her friend was snatched from the stairwell, just steps from her grandmother's door. Since then, the story of how the child who came to be known as Girl X was viciously raped, choked, and left for dead has spread far beyond the Chicago Housing Authority building at 1121 North Larrabee Street. And last week, the story took a dramatic turn when a 25-year-old man who had lived in the building was charged. The life of Shatoya Curry was left in complete shambles after she was left in a coma. She actually had to learn how to walk, talk, and write again. And until this day, she is still not 100% well because of the brain injuries that she endured during the rape. Patrick Sykes was eventually caught, charged, and given 120 years. Cabrini-Green would undergo an almost 20-year demolition process from 1995 to 2011, in which many of those years, people still lived in the buildings. The destruction of the Cabrini-Green projects, along with all the rest of the projects, will eventually lead to the invention of hybrid gangs. This has been the first episode of the Projects of Chicago. Stay tuned for your next episode. It's your boy, SNTV.